Hello and welcome to yet another video on a Johnson&Johnson lawsuit. This time over baby talcum powder. It has been a rough time for Johnson&Johnson. First this lawsuit, and later there has been another. So to begin dissecting this matter, there are several caveats to what follows in this video. This video will place everything in the context of postulation, as it was examined by the courts and may yet return on appeal. As both sides are making claims, only the established independent evidence will be put forward as a hard fact. There are intrinsic biases in how it is presented. The lawsuit centers around the unfortunate and untimely death of a woman who was using Johnson&Johnson branded talcum powder. As with previous videos, this is another possibly carcinogenic substance, like coffee being reclassified in 2006. Despite this tenuous link, it has still led to litigants being paid millions in compensation. Talcum powder is basically oxygen, magnesium, and silicon mixed together, or in other words, it is very similar to glass. Historically, it has contained asbestos, a known carcinogen, and if that was still true, this case would have been over and done that much sooner. The reason it is being dragged out and now overturned, or at least thrown out, is it has not had asbestos in it since the 1970s. This particular lawsuit is different, as it is from a woman who claimed that she began using talcum powder at the age of 11 and has, for 41 years since, used it. They developed terminal ovarian cancer 10 years ago, and it is used as a deodorant and to absorb moisture. The key issue with this and other lawsuits has been the lack of warning for consumers and the balance of evidence from scientific research. This led to the $417 million award being overturned. Talc has been used with babies for a long time and as a feminine hygiene product for a similar period. In the last few decades, there has been a suspicion that it causes cancer. However, no hard link has been found. There hasn't been a causal link found either. It would be reasonable to expect that cancer in infants should be skyrocketing given its liberal use in that population. However, there is no such skyrocketing case of cancer in children, and there is still no evidence that it causes such an event. The 63-year-old has claimed she developed terminal ovarian cancer after decades of using Johnson & Johnson's products. Her lawyers argued Johnson & Johnson encouraged women to use its products, despite knowing of studies linking ovarian cancer to genital talc use. In March, a St. Louis jury rejected a Tennessee woman's claim that Johnson & Johnson's powder caused her ovarian cancer, and a New Jersey judge has dismissed 2 talcum powder lawsuits against the company, a company spokesperson has said. Though numerous studies have linked genital talc use to ovarian cancer, the research findings have not been consistent. They consist mostly of epidemiological or population studies, which cannot conclusively prove a cause and effect relationship between an exposure and later development of cancer. Scientists have hypothesized that talc might lead to cancer because crystals can move up the genitourinary tract into the peritoneal cavity, where the ovaries are, and may set off inflammation, and this is believed to play an important role in the development of ovarian cancer. There was a large government British study through the National Institute of Health, and to summarize the findings from their webpage, for perineal talc exposure, the weight of evidence does not support an association between perineal talc and the increased risk of ovarian cancer. Their use of a case control and cohort studies found that it was inconsistent. A meta-analysis of 16 studies observed an increased risk with the use of talc. However, it was not a dose-dependent relationship, and a pooled analysis from the Ovarian Cancer Association Consortium, composed of multiple case-controlled studies, included roughly 8,500 cases and nearly 10,000 controls, found a modest increase in risk. But the trend across increasing lifetime and the number of applications was not statistically significant. In other words, you can use it for as long as you want, and if you do not develop cancer, it is unlikely that continuing to use it will cause you to develop cancer. And this is from a large-scale British government study. There was no evidence of increased risk with increasing frequency of use, and another prospective study from the Women's Health Initiative examined the association between use of powder and the development of ovarian cancer among roughly 62,000 women without a history of cancer at enrollment and who provided exposure information. And much like the other study, these women were followed for a number of years with an average of 12 and a half. An association with ovarian cancer with ever use was not found, either by individual or by method of exposure, and that there was no increased risk observed for increasing duration of use. And this is a particularly worrying statement, given how much money has been awarded, particularly in America, to women who have brought litigation against Johnson&Johnson. And this can perhaps be understood given this article from asbestos.com. They associate asbestos with talc and give it as the causal link, and that this causal link wasn't made until 1968. Given the timing of this finding, it would be fair to assume that any industrial production would take time to shift over to new suppliers, assuming there was already asbestos in their talcum powder. In order to bring in quality control to prevent that particular contamination and still keep shelves stocked. As a result, the ability of Johnson&Johnson to demonstrate that talc was asbestos-free as far back as 1972 is either incredible luck or a sign that they had good suppliers or quality control in place at the time. To explain why this case is so interesting, it is not that it has collapsed on its merits, but that it is lost because of a Supreme Court ruling. In a decision in a case involving Bristol-Myers Squibb & Company, the Supreme Court said state courts cannot hear claims against companies that are not based in the state where the alleged injuries did not occur there. A St. Louis judge at a New Jersey-based Johnson & Johnson urging declared a mistrial, even though the case was already underway. The judge has nonetheless left the door open for the litigants to take the case up again in a jurisdiction in which they have standing. Now, this is an unfortunate situation for the litigants, as it has essentially left them with a large debt for their legal representation and put them back to the very start. On the basis of what has been stated so far, jurors tend to favour claimants in these cases, and there has been a considerable history of large multi-million-dollar awards given to litigants in these sorts of cases. So to summarise, this is a snapshot of the evidence that is presented to such people during hearings. The following selections are of pure research findings in isolation. The first being by Sonu et al. In 1993. There was no evidence that perineal application of talc was associated with increasing risk, or relative risk, but the frequency of reporting talc use was low in the study population. The next is by Wong and Company in 1999. A significant association between the duration of talc use and development of epithelial ovarian cancer was not demonstrable for the 1 to 9 year group or for the more than 20 years of use group. They eliminated the possible confounding variables of surgery by removing anyone who had that, and this included 135 participants in the study population. They also removed anyone who still had other issues, such as requiring hysterectomies, and the relative risk was still not there. The final one for this is work by Mills and Company in 2004. The risk for the ever use of talc compared to never users found that there was no dose-response association, but that tubal ligation modified the effect of talc on this, and that this then had an effect on the relative risk. This association with perineal talc use with women with no tubal ligation had a higher risk, particularly of serous invasive tumors. Their study provided some support for the hypothesis that perineal talc is associated with an increased risk of tumors. The final one being a meta-analysis in order to then balance what has been stated so far. This is by Harlow and Hartger in 1995. The authors conclude that the range of relative risk estimate of epidemiology ranges from 1.0 to 1.8 and means that the likelihood of cancer is plausible, but that considerable additional epidemiological studies were required, especially prospective investigations. In addition, clinico-pathological studies are needed to confirm or deny reports of talc embedded in human ovarian tissue and reports of talc migration through the human female reproductive tract. These 2 points being key to the litigation that has been declared a mistrial. So far, some evidence has shown that it is possible, and some evidence has shown that it is not possible. And another study by Kramer et al. In 1999 found exposure prior to rather than after a live birth appeared to be more harmful, and the association was most apparent for women with invasive serous cancers and least apparent for those with mucinous tumors. They conclude that there is a significant association between talc, genital hygiene, and the risk of ovarian cancer in the case of childbirthing parents. This being a particularly isolated study and very specific, and in context of the others, would indicate that yes, possibly there is, especially if they've had children. And such conflicting studies need yet more studies to look into them. The most recent meta-analysis found was by Huncherek, Geschwind, and Kolpelnik in 2003. They pooled 16 studies and found a relative risk of 1.33 overall. This was a statistically significant result, suggesting that there is a 33% increased risk of cancer when you use talc. Despite this finding, the data shows a lack of clear dose-response relationship. This made the relative risk questionable. Further analysis has shown that hospital-based studies showed no relationship between talc use and cancer versus those on a population level. This has suggested that selection bias or uncontrolled confounding variables may result in a spurious positive association, and this is a well-understood issue in large-scale population studies, and it's surprising that it hasn't been raised prior to this. In the case of better-known examples, it could be understood that if you look at smoking, smoking is currently most prevalent among those who are poor. As a consequence, there are many environmental factors that further impact upon the likelihood of developing cancer, which means not all cancer is tied to smoking, but there are considerable associations, and therefore smoking in and of itself is a risk factor, but is also indicative of other risk factors, which may also be true of talc. If nothing else will convince you of the reasons why this case at the moment should be looked at with some skepticism, it is this post from the Huffington Post. The fact that they are talking about it at all makes it a fair bet that it is a load of crap. More so for the fact that they proceed to jump over nearly 100 years of research and development, findings and corrections, such as the asbestos matter. The case that is particularly relevant to this has been given in the description below. The case reference number has been provided, and if you would like to look into the matter further, please do so. As unfortunate as it is that the woman involved in this litigation has died, it would be reasonable to look into other factors than the use of talc. As it stands currently, talc is very much a unicorn, or a golden goose, and lawyers are trying to strangle the goose in order to get the meat, rather than looking at the golden eggs. Thank you for watching this video. Please post any comments, questions, or suggestions you may have below.